I think I was actually just very fed up at that point because I'd tried recording it, multiple times, and that one was the one where the real like kind of frustration, anger, and everything came out.
This is Champagne is Also a Band podcast. One songwriter, one song. I'm Sven, your host for a journey into the music of Champaign-Urbana. Recorded in the Blue Box studio with a songwriter from the Champaign-Urbana music scene, past or present. Champagne is Also a Band podcast is proud to be a part of the Champagne Showers Podcast Network. Welcome to Champagne is Also a Band podcast. Today, I have David, a.k.a. WhipTRip. You may know David from one of our previous bonus episodes, bonus episode 25 with Half House Studios. He's a co-founding member. He's also currently the new drummer for Citrus Soul, and notable, he was back in NXT back in high school with Superman. So, WhipTRip, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Today we're going to be listening to your song Oil and Water, which was released as a single. So
yeah, and actually before we listen to it, it was a part of a project called Give Me an Excuse. And I actually went back and looked. I hadn't looked at it in a while. I was checking it the other day. Looks like the actual EP got taken off of Spotify. So I don't know what that was about. I never got a notification about it. Obviously, I hadn't listened to it in a while, so I don't know when it got taken down. Wow. But I'll be trying to get that project back up on streaming platforms soon. So check that out when it's back up.
Well, that's funny because I've had it. I mean, when this pod was taken down because some of the samples in one of the projects that was featured on a show were uncleared. They said, BMI has contacted us. This was a message from Spotify. They said, these are under the rights of BMI, and they notified my podcast host, and my podcast host was like, until you fix it, your entire podcast is off. So it was surprisingly aggressive, and I will say I fixed it very quickly as best I could, but it still felt kind of awful. I don't know.
Yeah. I was thinking about it too. I was like, I used all either royalty free or paid samples. Like, I'm trying to think of what it could have been that got it taken off. At least Spotify. I don't know about Apple Music, but I was thinking about it. I was like, I don't think I used any samples of it or anything that would have gotten it flagged. So I would have to go back and see. Again, I never got an email about it, but I'm not sure.
So was the whole project all your work, or was it?
Yeah, it was. Obviously, with Half House, I've been on a lot of kind of features or kind of posse cuts. It was my first real solo project, and it was more of like a Tira Whack kind of Whack World type EP where each song was, a minute and a half, 2 minutes maybe, to kind of just give you that snippet of the idea, give you kind of a framing, and then, kind of pull the wool over your eyes, and here's something different. Oil and Water, I believe, was, I want to say, track 2 on the album.
That's crazy. I was unaware of it. So without further ado, let's listen to the song.
Awesome.
Yeah, my feet red and my ears blue. I just wondered how I'd even get to hear you. Knowing my luck, I'd probably spill my beer too. I can't even lie how I felt about you. My eyes red, your feet cold. I was thinking you were alive by what you've been told. I'm a sweetie, honey, you can put your feet up. I'll pack the bowl and we can smoke this weed up. I gotta fucking hate you, and I don't wanna blame you. I gotta fucking hate you, but I don't wanna blame you, 'cause you always been special to me. It's fucked up, fuck was never meant to be, 'cause you and me are like oil and water. You and me are like oil and water. You fucked me up, yeah, for a while. I wanna moan like that shit was gone out of style. Can't even say that I wasn't dumbstruck. but I could certainly say that I was a dumb fuck. You're the reason that I started smoking cigarettes. Now the only thing I wanna do is give head. What else can I say except what's been said? Now the only thing I wanna do is give head. I gotta fucking hate you, and I don't wanna blame you. I gotta fucking hate you, but I don't wanna blame you, 'cause you always been special to me. It's fucked up, fuck was never meant to be, 'cause you and me are like oil and water. You and me are like oil and water.
Welcome back. So, of course, my first and favorite question to always ask is, what came first? Was it the words or was it the music?
For sure the music, and, you know, being a producer, it was kind of like, I'll be honest, I'm more of a producer first than a writer. In a lot of ways, the words kind of flow from the music, and I know a lot of people kind of do it the opposite. They'll have an idea, kind of get an idea for their words, and then they'll build the music around that. I think with this one in particular, I was just kind of sitting around making some beats and got that guitar sample. It's like, oh, I got to use this, and really just enjoyed the beat so much that I was like, let's just see where this goes, see where the writing process goes.
Would you say that it started with that sample of the guitar? In the beats, you started off with the guitar. Now, one of the things that I'm always curious about when there's the construction of the beats and you have a sample of guitar, horns, whatever, and then you want to go back over that and add that bass line. I don't know if I've ever even asked it like this, but
Sure.
How did you come up and construct the bass line to put underneath that? Did you sit listening to that over and over and just kind of play something until it kind of made sense, or did it just pop into your head?
It's a creative process that you could kind of just call an equivalent to throwing paint on the wall almost until something sticks, right? You know, you've got to find your key, you got to figure out, oh, maybe this note. I think really with the tools I have, it was just a matter of figuring out what kind of sound I wanted first before really even designing or layering the rhythm itself. Rather than figuring out the rhythm first, it's like picking the sound. You know, the guitar sample is nice kind of reverb. The bass almost throws that kind of crunchy, almost grit on it. And I knew I liked that. So I started there. I think the bass itself isn't super complicated, but it does add that bit of heft to the beat.
I wonder if maybe I'm going to expand it a little bit more, is sometimes with using a sample, there's this maybe perception that you get limited by the sample, but it sounds like in some ways there's like a freedom to explore if you have that something to kind of hold you down to something.
Yeah.
Like it keeps you accountable, if you want to say, like it keeps you accountable to something, and then you have to kind of work everything else around it. At least that's how I'm picturing putting those elements together to make a beat.
Yeah, I would say so. And honestly, I mean, that's a good way to think about it. Like the sample is kind of like your lighthouse in a sense. Like you can kind of drop it back a little bit or even take it out of your beat, but that's kind of your guiding light for building the rest of your song around almost. And especially for me, you know, it kind of gives me even, maybe not so much inspiration, but it gives me a mood or kind of like almost even a theme maybe to work around to start writing. You know, I wouldn't necessarily listen to the sample and start writing about, you know, I don't know, World War II or something, you know,
right.
Just a random example, but it's like a guiding light, kind of a beacon, kind of a lighthouse almost. And, you know, you got your boats and you got your dams and whatever.
Right.
Bad analogy maybe, but I think you get what I'm saying.
It creates an emotional context within which you can operate. At what point did you realize that there was a theme to this? I'm going to say globally, if I would say that the theme is a relationship, we'll just say globally,
Sure.
like that you wanted to make it out of a relationship and then later kind of a failed, maybe not failed, I don't know, or a conflicting relationship, I want to say, right? So
Yeah. I would say, honestly, I think even early on during the process of just making the beat, I knew that it was more than just another beat. Not to say that I just make anything, but I think, I do, as a producer, make a lot of beats, a lot of throwaways, that don't make the cutting room floor. And so with the sample, with the kind of 808 that I had chosen, I was like, okay, this is a real good foundation, so let me build something on top of it. It was in our first house of Half House. It was the first era, it was still we were all still kind of new to the space, and it was like the first time I had really had to sit down alone in the studio to just kind of make whatever I wanted. And that's not to say I didn't have the opportunity to, but it was the first time I had really kind of sat down in there alone. It was like a Sunday or something. The sun was out. I was just like, yeah, let me just see what I got. And so it kind of gave me the chance to think what this kind of music was trying to tell me, what I wanted to tell through the beat. And obviously, it's not born out of nothing, right? It's like, obviously I have a story, I guess you could say, that relates to it, of course, which I'm sure we'll get into. But I think the feeling, the emotion was there, and then I just had to kind of write the words around what I wanted to say, almost.
Noticing that the bass really drops for the chorus part, was the chorus the first part that you wrote, or did you? I'm always curious about the order. Like, I've had many discussions with people about how you try to make the chorus the big special thing that is the earworm, is the thing that draws people back, that people are excited about, and that verse can somewhat be like a cooling off period, and then you just ramp back up to the chorus. And so I'm always curious about writing the chorus first and then feeling out how to get the verses out, or having the verses and then like, how do I get this exciting into a chorus? I don't know. I was curious about your process there.
I think when I'm sitting down alone, oftentimes I will build a beat up to kind of its maximum. All my elements are in, all of my counter melodies are in. And at that point, I'm like, all right, what can I say in this section where everything's going, everything's hitting, and, if I say too much, or if I hit this line weird, it might be muddy in the mix, or, it might not be so coherent to, maybe there's a ton of elements here. I think before I had even kind of sequenced out the beat, kind of taken it into its constituent parts, verse, chorus, I just had the full thing, and I was like, okay, let me start there. I had the idea to write this song about, this kind of regretful, maybe not regretful, but the sample to me almost had like a kind of melancholy, almost like reflective feel to it. So I was like, let me reflect, let me, almost like self-analyze a little bit here on this song. And also, I think with the lyrics, I tend to repeat or kind of have a motif through the chorus where I kind of switch between but, cause, and, with similar lines, but the idea is that I say but first, and then I say cause, and then and, I believe, just so the idea is to like reflect or to give that nuance, like, yeah, I am saying these same things in a roundabout way. It's not really because of this person, right? It's my own issue. It's my own fault, I guess you could say. And yeah, I do kind of fucking hate you, but it's not really because of you. It's because of my own misconception, my own failing to see some nuance.
You have two verses. I think about when there's that structure of, there's two verses. That first verse, I feel like that's the moment that you're actually in the relationship. I kind of think about that first, you broke it up into these 2 4-line parts. So like that first chunk is you meeting and falling kind of in love, but I'm kind of almost that goofy, knowing my luck, I'll probably spill my beer too. Kind of like I'm a goof, but I'm a lovable goof. I don't know. That was the impression and I'm projecting an awful lot because I like to think of myself as a lovable goof. The other part is like, yeah, maybe you had that. And then when you enter into that second group of the my eyes red, your feet cold, is this kind of like realizing that you might be breaking up, but also I know we're going to break up, but let's just hang out and be sweet to each other. But then it flows into the chorus where it's almost like this internal voice of you analyzing the situation, realizing that it's not a great situation. I'm sorry. I like to just kind of like spout what I'm coming up with in my head, but it kind of hits me when it's the verse 2 is definitely the post breakup, like your friends are kind of tired of hearing you talk about how you're so miserable about how you just aren't, like, that's all you can think about. That's all you can do, and then that again is broken up into that first 4 line where it's just like, but it's my fault. I'm sad. I'm the one. And then kind of the second half of that verse is you, like, the results of it in a weird way. Like the line of, you're the reason I started smoking cigarettes, and now the only thing I want to do is give head. I was thinking about that in terms of, those are both very oral things. And I thought about the two contrast of, like, when you smoke cigarettes or whatever, if you smoke anything, it's kind of a solitary act, and it's for your pleasure only. And then to give head is to give pleasure but not really receive any in a weird way as well. So it's this weird dichotomy that you're creating, which on the surface it rhymes really well. I love it. It just, I don't know, it does this weird thing where you're like, that's clever, but I'm also like, but that's so sad. In a weird way. I don't know. You had this neat line of the relationship, the breakup, and then kind of the end result. But because you only have the 2 verses, it kind of leaves very open, and then you're still back to that, like, well, this still sucks, and I hate it, and I don't. It still holds on to me. Anyway, I just like to spout out all my interpretations first, and then kind of hear what you were thinking. But as we're talking about the structure and everything, that was one of the things that popped into my head. There seemed to have been a story related to this, so I don't know if you want to tell a little bit about that.
I won't name names. I'll keep it general. It is essentially, when I was, right out of high school, I guess, I fell head over heels for this girl. It's going to sound maybe not bad, but obviously, I'm writing this song about myself kind of being a dumbass, right? Well, I guess I'll give some context. I was in a relationship at the time, non-monogamously. In my eyes, I was like, okay, there's nothing wrong. If maybe, I pursue this person being, 18 or whatever, you're not really thinking, like, maybe this person doesn't want to date somebody who has a partner, or, maybe they don't want to do the emotional labor that require them to kind of get oriented into this scenario. Me being kind of a little more arrogant than I am now, I was like, oh, it'll be fine. I'll just pursue, and no harm, no foul, right? Like, I'm not being creepy. I'm just trying to get to know you. I'm trying to find out what I can about you, try and see where this goes, right? And without giving away too many details, it obviously did not work out very well in the end. I will say our friend group did not survive very well long after that. I guess roundabout, let's just say it is a story about kind of trying to love and realizing that you can't have everything that you want, just because you want something really bad. There's absolutely no reason why you should just get it, right? I think personally, good lesson to learn when I did. I think if I had learned it later, could have been much more detrimental to me. But, I think just generally, we've talked since, and, there's no, like, real bad blood. It was just like a youthful ignorance, youthful arrogance kind of thing. You're out of high school, you think you're on top of the world, you're like, oh, I'm an quote-unquote adult now, and we live and learn,
Yeah, in some ways, kind of have to go through that process of having a really awful breakup, something that just kind of shakes us to the core. I think just makes us better people, but also makes us realize, like, one, what we like, what we now have to observe as maybe red flags in ourselves or in other people.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I kind of don't wish that kind of suffering on someone else, but I also think if you haven't gone through that, I don't know how you could really understand yourself in a way. I don't know. And maybe, I'm obviously speaking from personal experience, but I think that that's like a real growth part that makes you a better person and more empathetic. And I appreciate that that's just something that I think in human relationships, that's something that kind of has to happen, I think. But,
And so, years later, sitting down in the studio, and I'm thinking about it, like, I got this kind of melancholic song, maybe a bit reflective. And I'm like, you know what? Let me see if I can maybe sit down, put my thoughts onto paper for this song, it's like, you know what, I kind of fucking hate you. Not because you rejected me, but because it's like a reflective hatred. It's really about hating myself for kind of being stupid. Being where I was in that headspace, it's a reflective or a reflexive, I don't know which it would be in that context, animosity towards this person. Again, we've talked since then, but in that moment, I was really like, oh, I was kind of hurt. I was taken aback. And I think really the biggest thing was my ego was bruised. I was like, I kind of look like a fool. I mean, obviously, again, good lesson to learn, but at the time, ego's a big thing for us, especially when we're thinking we're, hot shit. It was a good ego check. In that chorus, it's like, I kind of fucking hate you, but I don't want to blame you because it's not her fault that I caught feelings and really didn't know how to deal with them. And yeah, I think chorus in there, and then even that intro, I think is kind of just a reference to, we would get together sometimes, we would smoke some weed. And even before I met this person, that line, I think I said, what did I say? I was thinking you were lied about what you've been told. There's a lot that kind of happens when you're younger and you're kind of in your head about all of the things that people could potentially be saying about you, things that people have certainly said about you. I think that line kind of references, even before I met this person, they had kind of a preconception about what kind of person I was, because I think even back then I was still kind of in a more arrogant headspace. At the time, like I'd mentioned, I was in a non-monogamous relationship, so I think maybe he's a little, weird, or maybe he's different, whatever. It was kind of almost, I don't want to say doomed from the start, but it's one of those things, yeah, you go into something with a preconception on both of our ends. That's kind of the result.
One of the things that I meant to talk about a ways back when you mentioned the actual construction of this piece, you mentioned that you had to think about, would this part with my vocals, etc., would that be a problem, like sonically? It kind of hit me how you are a writer, beat maker, but you also think about it from an engineering perspective. I think that may be an element that sometimes when a composer is thinking about it, or a writer is thinking about it, however you want to put it. And I'm just curious about, because you mainly think of yourself as a beat maker, is that something that kind of is just ingrained a little bit, just to think about what the end result will be, rather than like, what is that snapshot of, in the writing, you're just like, I'm trying to just capture a snapshot of these different things, not necessarily how they're all going to look put together.
Sure. Well, it's funny you mention that, because actually, if you listen back to the song, in the background, there's like a pointing at me like
I'm thinking, is that the da-da-da or whatever the...
Yeah, that kind of almost waily kind of gibberish in the background noise.
I did have that. I was going to ask about that, but anyway, go ahead.
Okay, no, so, I mean, part of the process for me, sometimes even before I start writing, is literally just kind of getting in the booth, recording in just kind of anything, but instead of, trying to sit there and write lyrics out, I'm testing melodies, I'm trying, singing around, I'm kind of, the whatever in different notes, different rhythms. And if something really kind of sticks, if something's like, oh, that sounds really good, it's kind of like ear candy, then, I can go back and maybe fill in some lines, maybe I can start there, right? And so that part in the background that you hear, I was going back through and listening to what I had recorded, just to see if anything stuck out. That part stuck out so much that I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to put it in the song, kind of in the background. It kind of gives it almost like a, I don't know, I've mentioned Superman here. He loves that song specifically for that kind of background.
Sure.
He'll always joke with me. It's like one of those things where I don't even think I've really done that much since. But if you really have time to sit down in a studio, really kind of just before you even start writing, and I'm lucky because there's a studio in the back of my house, so I can just kind of do that, right? If you have time to, just sit down and sing around, try some blah blah blahs and some yahs and some different consonants, vowel play. I think that's something that I think maybe I'm overanalyzing it, but I think it gets lost in the sauce a little bit, you know? There is a focus on either having, you know, good words to say or having a catchy melody or having a message. And obviously that's important, but I think, you know, it's a song. It's supposed to catch your ear. It's supposed to draw you in, right? And so if you start there with, you know, sonically, this is what I want, you know, I think the rest of the process is a lot easier from then on.
And I had to listen to it a few times because I was like, is that like a sample that's being manipulated a little bit? Or you put some nice effects on that.
Yeah.
In the second chorus, I don't know whether it's because the first chorus, it kind of hides in there and then you bring it out a little bit in the second chorus. But I had to listen back and say, oh yeah, it's also in the first chorus. I kind of want to say that play in there, it kind of ducks in and out and adds to the overall like texture and the harmonies that are going on. And so I think that's probably one of my favorite parts, but I don't know. And I mean, the only other part that also catches me is like that first chorus where the bass drops in and you've had that kind of sweet guitar laying down the harmonies behind you, and then that gritty bass just kind of jumps in there, and I think it just adds that context of like, it's not aggression, but it's just kind of revulsion kind of feel. Like all of a sudden, that's why I always think of it as like your internal voice is like, oh boy, what did I just get myself into? Within that context, I'll give it a twofer and say that it's that. What would you say your original like throwaway da-da-das gets thrown in there, and then that bass drop is the second part? You know, those are my two favorite parts, I think. So is there anything else that ended up in the song that was kind of like an experiment like that?
That scream at the end, I took that a couple of times. The one that ended up in there was like, I think I was actually just very fed up at that point because I'd tried recording it, you know, multiple times, and that one was the one where the real like kind of frustration, anger, and everything came out. Hopefully, you can kind of hear that in the record, and I think it's a good way to end the song, you know, on a bit of a release.
I'm just curious what your favorite part of the song is.
I think personally, every time I hear the intro, every time those first few words come in, I'm kind of almost, I mean, and it's for me, obviously, you know, I'm put right back into that situation, right? In a way, it kind of brings me back like, oh, you know, and it's almost like exposure therapy in a way. And I remember back to when I was making the song, kind of how I was feeling, trying to relive those moments. And then, you know, I go further back and it's like, oh yeah, you know, I'm a different person, or I've learned a lot since then, I should say. The intro into those first few lines, to me, really set the rest of the song up to, you know, speak what the kind of message is for people. And I think, especially in that first chorus, I think I did it more in the first chorus than the second one. But, you know, in the first part, you know, I said my feet red, my ears blue. And then that second kind of stanza, my eyes red, your feet cold. And I mentioned this earlier. It's kind of like trying to frame it from not only my perspective, in a sense, but also from hers in a sense, you know, and I guess repeat but not being the exact same. Contextualization versus dictation was kind of what I wanted to almost get across in most of the song, really. You know, I made this kind of mistake, or I maybe thought something was some way that it wasn't. In the same vein, it's like to bring the context to the listener, to kind of try and make them see that, hey, maybe I'm a unreliable narrator for this track. I'm trying to think of the story. It's like Rashomon or something, where it's told from 3 different perspectives. And it's less like I'm telling it from each perspective, but, you know, it's not just me saying I'm right and, you know, I had nothing bad to do or whatever. It's like, yeah, here's this context. Maybe I was an idiot.
Why did you pick this song to be the song you wanted to talk about today?
I think for me, it is the song that you could say is most associated with my solo work, short of my EP, which obviously no longer on streaming. That song in particular just kind of is very personal to me. And I think if this person ever listens to this podcast, hopefully it's not Well, actually, funny story, just kind of side note. Our first performance ever as Half House, I had a 15-minute set, and I played this song in our house. She was actually there, and so I was trying not to, like, look her in the eyes the whole time I'm performing this song, because it had been like years since we had kind of gone our separate ways. I think, thinking back to it, it's like there's a lot of history even now with that song for me. I don't think it'll ever, I guess, go out of my rotation in a sense, like it's a good reminder to myself, really, at the end of the day, that I'm just a person and everyone makes mistakes, but don't make this one again.
Champaign is also a band. Podcast is proud to support Exile on Main Street. Exile on Main Street, located in the old train station building at 100 North Chestnut Street in downtown Champaign, has been helping to build record collections since 2004. Carrying a wide array of new and used LPs, CDs, and video games. Exile on Main Street has something for just about any music enthusiast and old school gaming devotee. Exile also hosts regular free live music shows on its stage, so be sure to check out their Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages for the up-to-date details on the next upcoming event. Open 7 days a week, they can be reached by phone at 217-398-MAIN. That's 217-398-6246.
Welcome back. So, WhipTRip, what is your favorite Champaign-Urbana venue?
I would have to say, performance-wise, and I think we've talked about this when you were talking to me at Mousepad, performance-wise, it has to be Canopy Club. Opportunity-wise, stage-wise, I would say, in terms of the type of music we're performing, Canopy or Gallery Art Bar. The guys over at Gallery are really nice. They actually really like us. We're trying to do more shows over there, and we recently did Mousepad's album release party over there, which was a lot of fun. I really like that venue, especially just, with, 360 kind of screens up on the walls. You can really do a lot in that space with not much,
Well, and thing that's been interesting is when that was Nola's, but also Blackbird, is it's still the same kind of space, but the addition of the visual elements, I think, livens it and makes it feel less narrow. I want to say, it works. It functions as a great venue, but just being able to use elements that make it feel bigger, because you get this nice juxtaposition of it's bigger, but yet it's more intimate. I don't know. I'm always a big fan of the intimate shows as opposed to the big, huge shows. I can understand as a performer it'd be great to have big shows because that would be pretty wild. But as a audience member, I enjoy it where it's it has that a select few are getting to experience something, which I know. I mean, that's me being a selfish audience member in a way, because
Sure.
It's better if more people get to hear it. I like the unique moments. What's been your favorite? And you can also include some DIY spaces as well. I also think of those as venues as well.
Yeah. I guess before we move on, I will just say, performance-wise, performing there, those are my top. I would say as a listener, as just somebody going to the venue or what have you, Rose Bowl's always got a special place in my heart just because it is, such a local staple. I've actually been very impressed with the Beat recently. I'll just say this. I don't go to house shows too often, kind of tight closed spaces where the ceiling might touch my head, kind of feel a little claustrophobic, but especially with, the Beat being outside, get some drinks, walk around, do a little dancing, community's out, having a good time. That's been really nice to see. Hope to perform with Half House at the Beat at some point, but regardless, it's been a really nice community venue almost.
What do you think makes a good music community? And I know you answered this a little bit in the bonus episode, but I'm just curious, since some time has passed, if you have some different viewpoints on that.
That is a good question. I think what makes a good music community is always going to be conditional or a bit nuanced to where you're at, right? Our music community, I even said this back in that bonus episode, we are really lucky in this area, good schools, good music programs, and it's right in the middle of, Chicago, Indy, and St. Louis. So you have all of these influences kind of bleeding inwards to Champaign area. You get this fusion, you get crossover. Really the biggest thing for me here is people just like music. You kind of go to some places, like I took a trip to Nashville some years ago, and, it's like the music town. Every damn bar you go into, it's honky tonk or my baby and her, tractor or whatever. And, if that's your thing, that's awesome. But, for a town that's supposed to be the music place, there's not much variety there. And I think, Champaign certainly has kind of its more dominant genres. You have your singer-songwriters, you have your, kind of country folk, you have your hip-hop scene. But I mean, even here, there's like a small hardcore scene. There's a scene for drum and bass. You kind of have even these smaller niches where I feel like you only maybe have that in a larger city present in Champaign. People kind of carve out their own space in this music scene, and that's something I really appreciate.
So one of the questions I had was, Half House often plays as a collective rather than individuals. Why do you think that's so effective?
Half House kind of started as, pet project, right? We were just making music together, so everyone was kind of hopping on a song when we were in the studio making beats, right? So that kind of is just how it ended up going, in a sense. We would always kind of, do these posse cuts, or, there'd be maybe 3-4 people on a song, and we'd maybe cut a person out or, put a chorus in. There are your members of Half House who do pursue their own kind of singular artistic pursuits, Supra, Mousepad. I mean, I'm Lost too. Leslie has been performing since before, obviously, Half House was around. Having those guys be kind of their own artists has been good for them, especially to branch away, to distinguish themselves sonically. I think there is kind of this almost Half House sound in a sense. Huh. And, we're kind of all over the place, but I guess maybe it's just the way it's mixed, or maybe it's the way we construct a beat, and I don't even really have a good example of it. But, if you go listen to, Half House B-sides versus Mousepad's new project, they're going to be sonically, very different. It kind of gives everyone a bit of a baseline almost. If all you want to do is, hey, let's make some music together, we're here to have fun, we're going to maybe just go a little crazy, have a ton of drafts, and maybe we want to release this song. I think that's a good kind of outlet for some people. I mean, myself included. Like, I don't maybe nearly sit down as much as I should to write solo tracks. But again, it's like, for me, I'm getting exactly out of it what I'm putting in, which is the opportunity to hone my writing skills. Because, I obviously came into this as a producer. Like, I was like, oh, let me engineer, let me record this and that. And I'd thought about writing before and tried kind of writing to some songs and never really had anything that kind of stuck out to me. But you sit through enough Fridays, a little drunk with your friends, you get that liquid courage to write, and then all of a sudden you're doing it sober, and then all of a sudden you've got, a couple projects out with your friends. And so for me, it's like I am honing my craft, and I think, all of us have kind of pursued our own individual music careers to different ends. And so I guess to kind of answer your question, I would say we all are contributing, I guess, in our own ways, and everyone kind of has a bit of a different way of, interacting with what Half House is, or like what Half House means to them. And so, yeah, sometimes it is just, I'll sit down with you guys, I'll record, and maybe that's all I do. That's fine. I think, to your point about performing, for example, one that comes to mind is Ebb. Our boy Ebb, he's been freestyling, since we were sitting together at the lunch table in high school. It's not necessarily for a lack of talent. I just think he never really had the thought to like sit down and record, or really thought much beyond, oh, maybe I'll freestyle, this and that. It's fun, right? we've gotten him into the studio, and he's recorded a couple tracks. He's done a couple solo shows now, and it's kind of nice to see his growth as an individual, because he's really he's chasing after what he wants to do. I'm glad we kind of were able to not guide him there, or it's not like we're the reason he's there. He's a talent in and of himself, but kind of almost have a framework and in a space where he can record.
It is neat to see Half House as a collective going out to perform as a whole.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't really have some of the songs that you perform as Half House without all of the members of Half House. So, I mean, I feel like I said something that's very obvious, but
we all have our own way of approaching a Half House track, and we'll even laugh about it sometimes. We each have a certain way we'll approach a track sonically, like lyrics or rhythm or whatever. It's like, oh, yep, that's a WhipTRip verse, or oh, yep, that's a I Am Lost 2, chorus or whatever. And that is also really cool, just kind of having that rapport with each other as artists and as, producers, to have it almost be not unspoken, but it's from where we were at when we started to now, it's almost like we're just very familiar now. It just comes a lot easier. I don't know, we just end up having a really good time together. There are songs where if you took somebody out of, even if they have 8 bars, you take them out of the song, it's a completely different song, because this part leads into this part, or he's building off of what this guy was doing first, or this line is referenced here, so on and so forth.
Champaign is also a band podcast is proud to support Jubilee Cafe. Jubilee Cafe is a free weekly meal program at Community United Church of Christ, 805 South 6th Street in Champaign, Illinois. Jubilee Cafe serves a home-cooked meal from 5 to 6:30 each Monday. Their mission is to feed hungry people by cooking healthy, delicious meals and by serving their guests restaurant-style with servers waiting on tables. Jubilee Cafe is open to anyone who cares to eat with them. Because food insecurity among students is so high, they serve students as well as others in and around the Champaign-Urbana community who struggle with hunger. Meals are free to all and will be served each Monday evening, located in the accessible lower level of the building at 6th and Daniel Streets in Champaign. For more information on the meal or how to volunteer, go to the Jubilee Cafe CUCC Facebook page or email them at jubilee.cafe@community-ucc.org. That's jubilee.cafe@community-ucc.org.
Welcome back. So, WhipTRip, what is your favorite non-musical thing or things?
Well, a very broad question. Favorite non-musical thing or things? Well, I've got a clean answer and a not so clean answer. One I'm sure you can guess based on the song. Other one being, of course, the safe for work version, I guess you could say. I absolutely love swimming, and that's kind of like a random thing. I wish the only indoor pool wasn't the ones on campus, because that, or maybe there are more. I'm not aware, but the cost is they make you pay for the full semester at one time, and I'm not sitting on $600 or something at any given point. But regardless, whenever I get a chance to, I'm out swimming. It's just something about being in the water, floating. For me, what it really is the floaty kind of buoyancy, and I don't know why. It's just a thing that I really enjoy ever since I was a kid, even, which is not to be too politically incorrect here, but it's a broken stereotype for sure.
Are we talking that you like to go and swim laps, or just be able to just be in water and I'm just curious. Is it do you see it as exercise or a Zen moment, or I'm not even sure. So, yeah.
For a while, I did actually, this past spring, I did buy the the pass for U of I, and I was swimming laps. It wasn't really what I was looking for. It was a good chance to swim, get some exercise. But yeah, for me, it's really just about sitting in the pool. My friend Rex, who also does a little bit of some production here and there for Half House, as well as, just to kind of plug him here, he does make MIDI controllers, which absolutely wonderful to use. In Ableton, our friend got it to work in FL, so, hit him up. But he's got or rather his parents have a pool, and, back in high school, we would be swimming, and it would be like 9. Everyone would be like out of the pool for 30 minutes. I'd still be in there, just floating on my back, kind of no care in the world. And he'd be like, "Are you ever getting out? You got to be, pruny at this point." Yeah, I don't know what it is. It's just, it's like, it's really like, yeah, it is like a Zen moment for me, something just about, I don't know, sitting in the water. There's a little bit more kind of resistance, sure, almost to, I don't have a great explanation for it.
Sure. Well, and I was just thinking, so it's like pool water, not like would you go to a lake?
Oh no, I love,
okay.
There's a couple like smaller lakes and stuff kind of, within a hour and a half drive of here. And I'm not there as often, but I do go swim around. Maybe I'll take, those paddle boards out or whatever. I'm not so much a fan of maybe the bugs and the marshy areas of,
sure,
the local lakes, but sitting in the water, nice and cool on a hot day, nothing beats it, really.
Yeah. No, well, I was thinking, I'm like, I'm not one to get in I guess, natural water. I'm not, I just, I don't know where that came from, but like, if I can't see the bottom, it freaks me out. And I'm sure there's a specific name for that, but it's just, I've never been, I remember in like, as a kid, it didn't bother me. And then as I got older, it just somehow started bothering me. So I haven't been able to do that. I kind of wish I could, but then again, I'll just take a pool any day, nice clean pool and see the bottom. I'm happy.
There's, and I can't remember, my friend of a friend knows this kind of hidden cliff, not hidden, but it's like, it's off the beaten trail. You got to go down a couple country roads, cut across, it's one of those.
Sure.
But it's a cliff diving spot downstate, and I was absolutely scared shitless. Even, I'm not much of a diver, it's mostly like being in the water, not necessarily jumping into it. But oh boy, when I tell you I jumped in that, and the rush, absolutely incredible. Did it like 8 more times, knocked the wind out of myself a little bit, had to be a little more careful after that. But that was really, I guess, most recent natural swimming that I can think of that really is memorable. There's a lot of spots like that downstate, actually, because I don't know what it is about the rock formations down there against the water, because I forget the name even of the body of water that's down there. But there's a ton of like cliff diving spots, and I'm not saying go jump off any cliff,
right.
Not making that recommendation for our podcast listeners, but there are certainly spots you can go. Yeah, just make a day out of it. Maybe bring some friends, bring some booze, enjoy a nice day out on the lake.
Sounds good. That does sound really good. WhipTRip, thank you so much for being on the show and talking about your song Oil and Water and writing songs and your techniques for generating beats. And I really appreciate your views on basically what makes a good music scene and your favorite non-musical things. And
absolutely.
Thanks for coming all the way out here.
Well, thanks for having me. Thank you for listening to Champagne is Also a Band podcast. This is WhipTRip reminding you, great music is out there. Go find it where you live. You'd be like, are you ever getting out? You got to be, pruny at this point.
That's a wrap.
Champagne is also a band.
You almost have an NPR voice. It's so good.
South Beaker on the inside.
Thank you for listening. Thank you.